Welcome back into another episode of the Huskers Radio Network podcast. I'm Jessica Coody, and we've started a series of get-to-know-yous with the Husker newcomers, and we've been talking to the Nebraska basketball players, but since Nebraska Volleyball was out of town, they were in Brazil on our foreign overseas trip, so they are just now back and getting back into town, and so we're going to start talking to the volleyball newcomers, and today we have freshman Caroline Jurevicius. Thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's start there. How was Brazil?
Brazil was an amazing experience. You get to learn a lot about yourself, a lot about your teammates, and how you operate when you're thrown into a situation that's pretty uncomfortable. 17 days in a foreign country it's a grind. And we had 2-a-days while we were there. We played some pretty amazing talent, but we learned a lot about ourselves as a program, and that's how we start building.
How was the competition different? Because Coach Cook kind of addressed that it was a little bit different as far as maybe some of the rules.
International ball is different in that substitutions are different. You can't have a libero serve, just little stuff like that makes it different than the American game. But majority of the team has played international before, so it wasn't like necessarily new. It was just a matter of refreshing on that, and it's a different ball too. And then the technique is very different. Like, it's a lot more relaxed in the international, like the other team. In Americans, it's a lot more like strength and pull through. Especially it's noticeable in the arm swing, like you wind up a lot more, whereas international, it's more like snap, like a quick snap. So that was a very big noticeable difference. And then they don't have as many tall players, but they have a lot more like skill-based, defensively gifted players.
How was the food over there?
The food was really, really good. I was a little nervous about that. The fruit was probably my favorite part, and then the coffee was insane. Yeah.
It's a big coffee drinker.
I'm a big coffee girl.
I feel like a lot of the volleyball players are big coffee girls.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, how has the adjustment been? You got here in, what, January?
January,
yeah. How's the last 6 months or so been for you?
I have absolutely loved it. I've always been a pretty independent person, and getting the opportunity to go out on my own and just live by myself and take care of myself has been really, really exciting for me. And also, I love a good challenge. I love a good routine. I love getting into that. So coming here, it's been great starting to build that and also build relationships with the girls. I love it. It's great.
Before you came here, take us through the recruiting process. I mean, and I feel like with volleyball, you commit a lot earlier than maybe some of the other sports. But obviously Nebraska has one of the best programs in the country, but it's all about, I'm sure you're fit and you could have gone a lot of different places. So why did you feel like Nebraska was a place for you?
So I started getting recruited by Nebraska in the 7th grade before the rules changed. And it was a pretty laid-back process. They offered me when I was in the 8th grade, and then went to camps a few times, and then the rules changed. And the rules changed when I was in the 8th grade, and I wanted to commit right then. After that, I think it was May 30th. So then it was just like cold cut for 2 years. I wanted to commit that summer after my 8th grade year, and my parents were like, absolutely not. You need to go explore and see what else is out there. So I'm like, okay, fine. June 15th of my sophomore year rolls around, and Nebraska was one of my first calls that day. And it was just a matter of how comfortable I was with the coaches. Like, there were some coaches where I would be like pacing around the house on the phone with, like completely anxious. And then my mom pointed it out to me, like I would be on the phone with Coach Cook and I'd just be like lying on my bed, completely relaxed. And I didn't even realize, but that was just like a little subconscious response to how I love the coaching staff and how much I respond to them.
Do you think that was a good change with the rules?
I think it's a very good change. As much as 8th graders and middle schoolers like to think they know what they want, they don't. And I think it gives them time to grow up a little bit, learn a little bit more about themselves and what they want in a program. Because if you ask a 7th grader, like, what's the biggest school you want to go to, they'll say something like Nebraska. But then once they get older, they might not love the game as much or might tap out a little bit or plateau. So I think giving them time to develop into who they are and who they will be in college a little bit more is really, really important.
I asked Natalie Potts this earlier, a basketball player, but this recruiting period just opened. The juniors that are just now, really in the last week, it's become official that they can be recruited. You went through this. What would be your advice to parents or girls that are listening in that are going through this? Because I'm sure it can be a pretty stressful time.
Do not let anybody push you around. Do not let anyone give you a timeline. This is for you. And if they're treating you like a piece of meat now, what are they going to do when you get to their program? Everything is on your time. It is important how you feel, not what the coaches push you into. It's all about you.
That's really great advice for sure, because I feel like it can be so much going on, but being able to manage that. Well, when you got here and you started playing beach for the first time, what was that like?
It was a very big learning curve, And I'm not gonna lie, it was really, really rough. And it was being away from home and then starting like new lifts and meeting new people. Beach was like a pretty rough time for the first 2 weeks. And then like you start to learn a little bit more. And there are a lot of different things with beach that you just have no idea about an indoor. Like, I don't know what polling was, but now I know. And it got a lot better, and it actually got enjoyable, which, like, if you told me that the first week here, like, you're gonna like beach by the end of it, I'm like, what? But you learn, and it develops you as a player. You have to get more touches. You're forced to touch the ball every single play. So it makes you a better all-around player for sure.
Another thing you got to experience for the first time in the spring was playing in front of Husker Nation. I know it was a little bit smaller crowd, but what was that like, getting out there for the first time?
Surreal.
Yeah.
Like, you grow up watching Husker volleyball and you're like, wow, I want to be there. And then you run out of like the tunnel, which was just a high school hallway, but it was still amazing. And then just to be surrounded by the energy and that many people who just bleed red, it's amazing. And just get like chills thinking about it. It was so cool.
So then there's that, and then all of a sudden here comes the announcement that, hey, we're going to play a volleyball game inside Memorial Stadium, and oh, hey, it's sold out. What was that like when all that was kind of unfolding for you guys?
Coach told us that that was going to happen in the weight room. I remember exactly where it was, but I just like was kind of listening like, huh? Like, how is this even possible? And then they mentioned there was going to be a country concert after, so I'm like just taking it all in. And I just don't think any other program in the country would be able to do that. There's nobody that does it like Nebraska. So I think it's just amazing, and it's a true testament to how the university runs and the athletic department and the fans.
You have a unique backstory. You actually have a little bit of a football background with your dad, who was a wide receiver in the NFL, Joe Jurevicius. So were you a football fan?
I was a football fan for those teams that my dad played for. I was born in Tampa when he played for the Bucks, and then lived in Seattle, and then he finished up his career in Cleveland, where he's from. So a little hometown story right there. Finished up being captain of the Browns, and then went down with a little bit of an injury and then retired. But I grew up being around professional football players and learning how they operate. So I think that's a pretty big reason why I have like a little bit of intensity to me, just because of how I was raised with my dad and the people that I've been surrounded with in my life.
Yeah, how much did that help develop you into the athlete that you were?
I can't like thank my dad enough. I mean, the way he sees the game because of football and because of being like an all-around athlete, he can see little things in volleyball and like do unconventional training. Like, for example, I developed my arm swing when I was like 11 or 12, and I'm working on it, trying to become a better hitter. He stuffed a sock inside of another sock, and every single night I would just throw it against the wall. And then after throwing the sock for about 3 months, that's when I started getting recruited. And it was just like, okay, if you do the little things, then the big things will come. And my dad really taught me that.
Oh, that's amazing. Before we started recording, you were telling me that just how you even kind of got into volleyball was a little bit unique too. It wasn't always natural for you.
It was definitely not always natural. Growing up, I was always really, really tall. It took me a really long time to grow into my body, and I'm still learning to this day. It's a growth process. And my dad my parents tried to get me into a bunch of sports. My mom ran track at Princeton too, so they're very just driven people. So got me into some sports like swimming, and swimming was probably my favorite besides volleyball. But my dad went to Penn State, and Penn State's only about 3-4 hour drive from where I'm from in Cleveland. And he would just expose me to these things, and I tried out for club one day, and then it all kind of went from there.
It's a good reminder that, hey, if it doesn't come easy for you, don't quit, right?
No, for sure.
Yeah. So, and then your dad played at Penn State. You grew up going to Penn State volleyball games. Penn State and Nebraska have had some heck of battles throughout the years. So how did you end up loving Nebraska over Penn State?
I think Penn State's an amazing program, but ultimately the way that I felt at Nebraska, it just pushed me to want to be here. Like, little side story, recruiting was extremely stressful for me, so I broke out into some face hives, like some pretty bad ones, and just like a bunch of stress hives. And then I was at Dream Team Camp 2 years ago, and that night I'm kind of like, I have an idea of where I want to go, and it was here, and I'm just like praying that night. I said, if this is where I'm supposed to be, give me a sign. I get in the car the next day, and my friend's mom looks at me and says, Caroline, your face hives are really clearing up. Maybe that's a sign. And that's when I was just kind of like, all right, so it's solidified. This is where I'm supposed to be.
Wow, what a cool story. Did I read somewhere they're moving here to Nebraska?
Yeah, so my little sister plays club volleyball, and ultimately club in Cleveland wasn't really giving her what she needed to go try to play at the level she could. So VCN, when I took a visit in the fall, she decided just to do a private lesson at VCN. And they offered her a top contract, and she ultimately took the initiative herself, which was so mature for a 15-year-old girl to do at the time, and said, I want to give myself the best shot I can. We're just going to move to Lincoln so I can train.
How cool is that then, that they're going to be right here for you?
It's so cool because I'm so close with my family, and having them here and having the ability to go home and see them, it's not every day, but I have the option to go see them, which is great. And Ava's thriving, and my family's happy. They're moving out west in a few years anyway once Ava graduates. So Nebraska was kind of a stepping stone. It was kind of final destination for me, if you could say that, and then stepping stone for my parents to get out west, and then a launching pad for Ava.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
It's got to be cool for her, too, to be able to be close to you and watch, the best program in the country right here, right up the road.
Yeah, I try to bring her around the girls and stuff like that just to show her what's out there.
That's cool. What goals do you have this summer?
Ultimately, this summer, my goals are to get stronger, get faster, and ultimately start working on some serve, receive, and defense, and just try to do what I can to help the team win a national championship.
Well, man, what a great conversation.
Thank you.
You've done this a time or two, right?
I have a little bit.
Yeah, all right. Well, appreciate your time, and won't be the first you'll do here on our network, so appreciate you stopping by.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
All right, and that is Caroline Jurevicius with Husker Volleyball. Make sure you subscribe and like wherever you listen to never miss an episode right here on the Huskers Radio Network podcast.